Hey, Toronto, welcome to How's the Market podcast. I'm Dave.
And I'm Ken. Nice to see you all again.
So, Ken, I thought we'd jump right into get a little bit more background in our journeys into real estate. So,
Yeah.
what brought you to the fun and exciting world of real estate?
Yeah, I always laugh. For most of the people that I mean yourself included, and everyone I speak with, the real estate isn't really a career that I think a lot of people initially see themselves going. It's a journey and a place they wind up. So my background is I started in the coaching and teaching world. I used to coach professionally. I coached intercollegiately at the University of Toronto. And during that time, I started doing a lot of our international recruiting. And during that time, really got to know a lot of families. Buying a house is a huge decision, but where to send your son or daughter, they're leaving home for the first time, new city, you're kind of entrusting them to the coaches and to the university and everyone there. It's a big decision. And it was in that process I really started to enjoy just getting to know people and helping them navigate such a big decision. One of the other coaches on one of the other intercollegiate teams was a realtor. And I started to work with him and he just said, hey, you would be great at real estate. You should consider doing it. So I started to get my license. And then it was basically right after I got married, made the switch. So piled into real estate, started selling right after that. And I've always approached real estate, the heart of a coach and a teacher, really, the heart of a teacher. So I'm also an OCT certified high school teacher. So I approached real estate the same way. I thought, what do people want to know? This is such a huge transaction. It's a massive investment. There's so much money, and not only just the financial side of it, but the lifestyle side of it, right? Where you decide to move your family to, where the schools, all the stores, and just really what your day to day, your lifestyle looks like. You are new to it, right?
Yeah,
I remember when I was buying my first place, I'm sure the same as you.
yeah,
You're like, where do I start?
yeah.
And there's so much information out there from so many different sources. And it's like, how do you vet it?
Like anything, the communication is so important. As a realtor, I always try to remember don't use too much jargon.
Yeah.
One of the lessons I've learned through my past and try to always remember in real estate is that communication happens on the other person's level. So you and I can use industry terms, but it can be totally lost on someone else, right? So it's, oh, what were you talking about? Oh, it actually means this. And why is that important? Oh, okay, this is what it means to you. So it's always continuing to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I kind of approached it from like, if when I went through the process, what would I want to know? I always used to joke with my clients, like, by the time we're done this, you should be able to do my job because I've instructed you so well. You
Yeah.
shouldn't do it without me, but you should feel so confident in the process because when someone understands a process, they can then be confident in their decisions. It's really difficult, you get to that moment of what do I offer for this property? What
Yeah.
terms and conditions do we want to include? And if you don't really have a crystal understanding of the process, it's incredibly difficult to make a confident decision. And the market has been just for the past decade been so strong and in such a seller's market. If you were a buyer, you had to make huge decisions within split seconds, within minutes,
With
right?
limited
With
information, no home inspection. Okay, I'm going up against 10 other people. All right, let's go this much over ask
Yeah,
and see what happens.
exactly. So for me, I really love that side of guiding it. And I was very fortunate in my real estate journey. I worked with an amazing partner, Lena Reese, and she really helped guide and mentor me, an icon in this business. And we had such a great partnership. And then what eventually brought me here was I really enjoyed selling, absolutely loved it. But once again, the teaching and coaching side of it. So then when Sotheby's opened up this new office in the Kingsway, they said, hey, are you interested in it? Knowing my background in coaching and teaching. And it was just such a perfect fit for me to combine my love of real estate and my love of coaching and teaching and just really marry the two together and supervise and guide and mentor all the amazing agents that we have in the office here.
And a little bit more of a work-life balance, I
A
imagine.
little bit more of a work-life balance.
Sorry, let me put that work-life golf
The
balance.
work-life golf balance. I have a newborn at home, so there's not too much social stuff happening now, but it is a big change because as you know, in real estate, when you're an active agent, your real times that you're working are when everyone else isn't. Evenings and weekends. And when you have a family, it's tough to do that. And that definitely was a motivating factor. But really for me, I'm such a big believer in we're lifelong learners. This industry is constantly changing. There's new legislation, new rules. There's new technology being put into homes, new building code. There's always something to learn. And I've loved that. And so I've really embraced and I've really enjoyed getting to provide that information to all the amazing agents here at Sotheby's.
Do you find having grown up on the mean streets of Alberta and then moving to Toronto, and then even when you relocated and lived overseas, just how overwhelming finding housing the process is? And that's helped you benefit and remember the eyes of the client that you're working with to see what they need and how to try and communicate, being like, oh, by the way, check out this restaurant. This is here. If work's here, you can't get there from here. That sort of thing.
Totally, because everyone has a different familiarity, right? And as you all know, you work with tons of clients as well. Where you start isn't usually where you finish, right? There's kind of that idea of, okay, I think I'd like this, and this might be the neighborhood and the style of home, and this will be what I'm looking for. And then as you start to go on your journey, you're able to show them things outside the box that they'd never consider and really guide them in a process of, hey, I know you never considered this neighborhood, but to your point, it was a little tougher during COVID. But before that, you could say, hey, go to this place on Saturday morning, go check out this coffee shop, walk around the neighborhood. Then maybe come back in the evening, go to a restaurant and get a real feel for the community. And you can guide people to options that they would have never considered, which is, yeah, likewise, moving from Lethbridge, Alberta to Toronto, big culture shock, big shift. And it's like, where do you begin if you don't have a guide? And that's what I've really enjoyed, is being that educator, that guide, and really helping people find their footing in. It's similar to when I had to buy an engagement ring, a wedding ring. I never talked about like diamond clarity and cut in my life.
Yeah.
And that was a wedding ring, not this massive financial decision I was making for some place that my family was going to live for 10, 15, 20 years, right? And so it's great to be a part of that and to really guide people and see that look on their faces when house kind of becomes home.
Yeah, it's very rare, and it's happened to me a handful of times in my career where people are like, hey, I want to go buy this house, or I want to go buy this condo. And I'm like, okay, tell me more about that. What are you looking for? Why does it work? No, this is the one I've been watching for a while. Sometimes it works, and depends on who the person is and what they're doing. I've had commercial real estate agents ask me for help like that, but I've had other clients, they're like, oh no, this is the one, we like it. Okay, we've got a few other books. You have to go look at one other one for me, just so you got something to compare from, because it can be dangerous if you just go, yeah, this is the one, jump right in. I love somebody who can make a decision quick, but it's there can be some downside to that too.
Absolutely. And then there's always like the dilemma of, that's probably a whole other conversation of, you see a house you really like on your first time out, you haven't seen enough, or do you wait? But that, as I said, is another entire conversation.
Now, I heard a rumor about there's a statue somewhere in Lethbridge about 4 touchdowns in one game. Is this true?
No poke high touchdown statues in Lethbridge. No, yeah. I grew up in Lethbridge, Alberta, really wonderful community. And then I was very fortunate enough to receive an athletic scholarship to play football at the University of Toronto and became a transplant. I moved out to Toronto in 2003, attended the University of Toronto at Trinity College, had an amazing undergrad experience. And just like a lot of people, you kind of come to the city, you fall in love with it, and you never leave. And so I was here. And after I was finished my undergraduate degree, finished playing, I immediately got into coaching and then had an opportunity to go overseas to Germany. So I was in the amazing town of Montabaur, Germany, played 2 years professionally with the Fighting Farmers of Montabaur in the German Football League.
Oh, das ist gut. Sprechen Deutsch?
Yeah, sehr gut. Ein bisschen. But once again, like it was a great experience in really getting almost a bit of that, total flip in your life's perspective, right? You're a stranger in a strange place, right? I went to a place where I didn't speak a word of German, didn't know anyone. I was taking a complete chance and ended up making lifelong friends, people that I'm still in contact with. They flew over for my wedding. It was a really great experience. Then once again, bringing it back to real estate is just, then you meet people who are new to the city, new to the country, and you realize, able to empathize, maybe is probably a better word, of just how big a change it is and how foreign or how new of a process it is. And to your point, you can't ever assume that people know the process. Right?
I was fortunate to live in Germany as well. And one of the stories I tell is trying to buy milk. And I'd gone through the experience in Australia, which is they speak English allegedly, but the things are done differently. Rather than it's 2%, it's 98% fat free. I could figure that out after a few mistakes. But in Germany, I remember standing in the supermarket going, okay, I think this is milk. Okay, let me take a quick survey. All right. 3 out of 5 people are going for that one. Okay, I'm going to go for that one. I get home, put it on the cereal, and I'm like, what is this? And it was like some sort of like festive eggnoggy type. I'm like, okay, so process of elimination. Do not buy that one again. Figure it out. But it's when it's a different language and it's just trial by error. But those experiences are so beneficial.
Oh, I loved it. Speaking with the 40 guys I'm playing with, some spoke English. I'm using a translator in the middle of the sideline of a football game. My funny story was trying to get my hair cut for the first time. Okay, I'm able to say, like, I need a haircut. And then she's like, what would you like? And I'm like, I'm pointing at photos because I had exhausted my German at that point. But it was just a really kind of fun experience. It was something I really loved and treasured. And so that's when I came back. Then I went and got my teaching degree at the University of Ottawa after my time in Germany. Fell in love with teaching, but came into a lovely teachers market. That was when, like, I think the unemployment rate for teachers was around 30%. It was super high. They weren't hiring.
Is that early 2000s?
That was 2011 was when I
Okay,
came out
yeah.
of teachers college. But I had a great opportunity to go back to the University of Toronto, and using my new Bachelor of Education degree, we started a student athlete support program. So we started basically a whole academic support program, like a study hall program. Started with just the football team, blossomed into all 40 intercollegiate teams. And from that transitioned into the recruiting side of it, the international recruiting for a lot of the intercollegiate teams. Met, as I said, a fellow coach who had been a realtor, said, you need to do this. I said, why not? Started getting my license on the side. And then eventually at some point, you got to take the leap of faith. And so it was after I got married, life had changed a little bit. I said, okay, let's go for it. And then I sit here before you today.
Awesome.
And how about you? What is your journey to get in the chair that you're sitting in right now? Dave, building off that, what brought you into the chair that you're sitting in right now?
Similar to yourself, I do have a bit of an interesting journey into real estate. I did my undergrad in sport management at Brock, started first year actually at Acadia with kin, and then got interested in sport management. Sports was always a big component, playing hockey growing up and volleyball and water skiing. After I finished my undergrad, I went over to Australia. I always had a dream to go to Australia when I was in high school, and was fortunate enough that I could make the ranks as a professional water skier and stunt performer doing shows.
I've seen the photos. Maybe we'll try and pull one up to share.
Yeah. Warning, there's some photos. I might be dressed as a clown and stuff. It was absolutely an amazing experience. And when I first got into water skiing, I was about 15 and starting to coach. And there's a Canadian water ski instructors course or coaching program out there. And it really teaches, a lot of the people taking the course are 15 or so, and it really breaks down, teaches people how to teach. 3 types of learners out there: audio, visual, kinesthetic. And so you never know who your audience is and who you're teaching to. So you have to present it in a way that all 3 will understand, or that they can be communicated effectively, understanding that communication happens on their level and not yours. Encouraging you that if something isn't working, rather than just maybe saying it again and louder verbatim, it's not going to happen. Try a different approach. Different things are going to resonate with different people. Different voices will resonate with different people. So really fortunate to be exposed to that when I was younger. Ended up going to Australia, doing some shows, and deciding that I wanted to further my education. And in total, I was there for about 3 years and had the opportunity to perform in the longest running show in the world at SeaWorld Australia.
Very cool.
Owned by Warner Brothers, and do my MBA at the same time. An amazing experience being on stage, performing to a crowd, regardless of the size, whether it was 5 or 25,000, or sometimes it was even 100,000, that you really learn how to hit your mark. You get to try different things comedically, see if that works. I had no problem trying to play the hero. My biggest challenge were trying to play the villain. So some of my goals became having kids like throw popcorn at me and stuff like that, being the heel, like in wrestling.
Yeah.
But also how to draw attention to yourself as well as push it towards someone else.
Yeah.
So when someone else has the spotlight, you can make yourself scarce and not affect the presentation, basically.
Would you find that's almost a little bit like being a realtor, right? Because at the end of the day, the client is always the star of the show. I think that's an important distinction that we make in our business. Is the realtor is the guide. I always joke the realtor is the Yoda on the back, but the client's Luke Skywalker. And that's probably something that was great to learn during your time there.
Yeah. A great book that really ties that together is Building a Story Brand by, I think it's Donald J. Miller. I always forget what the middle initial is, but basically walks you through the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Talks about how the consumer, regardless of what industry you're in, really views themselves as the hero.
Yeah.
A lot of the times the realtors, we view ourselves as the hero, but it's really, we're the trusted advisor helping them guide on their journey throughout the process.
Yeah, because like I always laugh too, right? It's a small language thing, but I'm sure you'd agree with it, right? When we say, oh, bought or sold, it's like my client bought that house or my client sold that house. I facilitated it, but I'm not on the deed.
Yeah.
I'm the one who's saying yes to the sale, right? Our job is to be there, as you say, you nailed it perfectly, is their advisor, right?
I'll often use the we or our, speak as a group, we're as a team. And I just find trying to communicate with my clients, and I'll do the devil's advocate for them or provide more information. Just say, hey, make sure you understand, think about that exit strategy. That's always number one. Like, I know it might be the dream house for now, but if you're selling in 15, 20 years, you might love trains, but not everybody loves the train tracks going through your 10 feet off the house. So that might be something that you want to consider.
Also too, like one thing I've loved about like my background in sport, you have a background in athletics and sport as well, is that trust, right? In knowing your role and having that for each other, right? Like when you're doing some of your stunts, you're going at a high speed, you've got someone on your shoulder, high level of trust there. And I find that carries over with a lot of athletes is there's that trust that, hey, you'll do right. It's a we, it's an us. Your clients are your teammates, right? They need you to perform for them.
There's a big reason why a lot of the Fortune 500 companies out there or the startups will recruit professional athletes or college level athletes. It's because they have the understanding and know the importance of communication and teamwork to be able to look at a big picture rather than how does this benefit me to rather than how as a collective, as a team, can we make this better together?
Yeah. And okay, so you're in Australia, get your MBA, and then what's the journey to get back here?
Quick transition to Germany to do a show there. Great experience living in a country where English was not the primary language and just getting to stand on stage and try to lip sync German. The role I played in the show, I often was the first one to speak, and our crowds there was about 5,000 to 7,000, and we'd have the stadium full all the time. And the first syllable out of my mouth, I would have the entire crowd laughing at me. This sort of segue into sales. I had them on their feet by the end, cheering for me. They bought in, they saw me, and that show is Sinbad, and it was good. I came back, and I was it was 2008, the first one I tried to stop, and then couldn't figure out what to do, couldn't find a job because of the state of the economy at the time. And I ended up going back to ski for another year for 2009, and then came back and actually went into retail. I've always had a passion for photography and worked at a camera store. And my manager was like, Dave, you should go into real estate. He was a realtor as well. I was like, okay, buy a triplex. And he taught me a few lessons about communication. But one of them was about dealing with clients is never to sell out of your own pocket.
Right.
So he would say, we might have somebody coming in to buy a point and shoot camera at the time that, let's say it's $200, $100. Like, you don't know their story. So you don't know if they've saved for 2 years to buy this. And just like, you don't know the person who's coming in spending $50,000 on camera gear, whether that's just somebody sent from the office to pick it up, or that's the CEO, or you don't know what their story is. So our job is to be that consultant to find them the best solution for it. And there's a number of different brands and a number of different options of doing things. I don't know. I've always had a drawn to real estate, and I can't pinpoint what it was. If it was maybe hearing Donald Trump talk back in the day about millionaires in real estate or something. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe during
one of the 800 movies. HGTV shows that are out there, right?
I couldn't pinpoint it. But from there, I actually went into Fortune 500 sales. I worked for Xerox and ADP, did that, and just didn't find that whole environment conducive to what I want to do. I basically recognized that I had more of an entrepreneurial mind, that I wanted to go and do my own thing. So I ended up transitioning into real estate, but I'd actually made the transition while I was there. I purchased my first property. I bought a triplex. And so I listened to what my manager had said, bought the triplex, went into real estate, took the lessons I learned both at retail and sales in the Fortune 500 world, SaaS to real estate. And it's been great.
Awesome. I am very fortunate to be able to work with you all the time.
Do I have to call you coach still?
You can. There are still, it's funny. Yeah. Once again, those former hats you wear, right? I'll see guys who I've coached, and 10 years later, now it's a decade. Oh, coach. I'm like, it's okay. You can call me Ken now. It's no problem. But it's funny kind of how that happens.
In Toronto, the skyline, like from my 5 years overseas, after I came back from Germany, I didn't recognize Toronto.
Yeah.
And that was, we'll say 2010, 2009, and seeing how much development that there's been since then, and the cranes in the sky,
and how much the city's grown, right? And it's become a world-class city, and with that becomes the growing pains of one, right? Like right now, obviously, we're talking about inflation, there's tax increases, right? There's congestion, there's capital projects that they're trying to do. But at the same time, there's nowhere like it. I mean, you've had the opportunity to travel. It's incredible. And when I get to bring friends and people that I lived with in Germany over and they get to see it, or from anywhere around the world, you realize how just amazingly diverse and beautiful this city really is, and how it has these amazing little neighborhoods just pocketed throughout it. Toronto, as they say, is city of neighborhoods, right? And you really find your little slice of the city that becomes yours and your families and your friends.
I'm glad to hear that you've embraced the center of the universe.
Yeah.
And that Alberta is okay with you having the I Heart Toronto tattoo?
I'm getting a sternly worded letter right now from everyone back at Alberta. But on the flip side of that too, listen, I'm not going to go defending provinces and cities, so we'll leave it at that.
There's a big transition from Torontonians going to Alberta now.
Yeah, it's been, yeah, the flow's been a little bit differently. And as someone from Alberta, I recently purchased my first investment property was in Alberta as well. So I have a great property in Calgary. I have family that still live there, and it's a beautiful city and very different lifestyle.
We'll have to dive
Dive it.
into that on a future episode,
Yeah, as
dedicated just to that.
to investment properties.
So enough about us. How about the market?
Let's dive in. I thought I'd just bring up some stats. So obviously, as the title of this show would suggest, how is the market, Dave? What are you finding out there to start the new year? I should
Just
say.
to start the
Let's
new
go
year,
to what
yeah,
we're
just
seeing in the first 2 weeks of January.
we're still in a very limited supply, limited number of transactions. But since the new year, we've seen actually buyers re-engage, see more interest, some properties starting to move. And I think some of that is some of the sellers' expectations are started to adjust, and the sellers have started to lower prices or communicated through their realtors that they're willing to do a deal that's more in line where market value is.
Yeah, and January is such an interesting month because I've always looked at it as how much of last year carries into this year. That's always to me what I've looked at every year is how much inventory we're bringing, what's the momentum that we're bringing, and obviously this year it's quite different compared to years past. So just to give some stats on it. So in all of 2022, so last year there were 75,140 MLS residential sales on the Trev MLS system. That was the lowest number since 2008. In on our last episode, I said there would be periods of the market. There was that kind of rush at the beginning of the year. There was a decline off the peak in the middle, and then a stabilization. So it was very front heavy loaded in sales.
I think it's good to point out that although it was in a low supply state a year ago, it was in a more of a faster market, meaning that properties would come up and they'd sell within that first 10 days.
Absolutely.
We're in still a low supply, but it's a slower, longer move for those homes.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a logjam. And the interesting thing is, once again, when you look at December's numbers, so the number of home sales, the actual sales on the MLS system were down 48.2% year over year. So we basically half the sales we had in 2021, but new listings were also down 21%. So there hasn't been that rush of inventory. And the interesting thing about December of last year was it was an incredibly chaotic or frantic month in terms of when you look at historical averages. So last December, if you look at months of inventory, that's the number of properties and how long it would take for every property on the MLS system to get sold, assuming you didn't add a single new one. It was 0.5 months of inventory. We're currently sitting at 2.8 months of inventory, which is actually in line with the 10-year average. The December 10-year average is 2.94 months of inventory. I always equate it to we've been driving on the Autobahn, and now we've gone on the off ramp. So we're still going 60 kilometers an hour, but we've just finished going 180, 200. So it feels like we're at a snail's pace, but obviously market conditions are different. But 2021, as you can attest to, was just such an anomaly in terms of activity. It was incredible.
2.8 months of inventory is still technically a seller's market.
Yeah, we're right in that point. And to what you've said, right? Buyers are starting to re-engage, but they're cautiously re-engaging. Sellers are starting to list, but they're very strategically looking at what inventory is out there, what's my competition out there. Kind of the real market fundamentals are coming back because, in 2021, you didn't really have to worry about what other homes for sale. You didn't really have to worry about what your competition was, how you were priced relative to them, obviously within reason. But if you were priced attractively and your house presented well, it sold. There was no question. Whereas now, there's still very low inventory, but sellers take a look at, okay, is there something around the corner that might attract a buyer's interest because buyers are being a little more thorough and careful with it, right?
Yeah. It's important to prepare the house properly too and price it. If anything that's prepared and priced accordingly, it's going to go fast and still might end up in multiple offers.
I know we still see that. I know in the media, they say that's hearsay and that's realtor talk, but it's what we're seeing. And really the reason why I wanted to read those numbers off and talk a bit about them is because when people ask, how's the market right now, it's just stabilized. We've had really record low inventory. We've had record low number of sales. So basically every month for the past 6 months, it's been a 20-year low in sales and it's been a 20-year low in new listings. So we're not seeing new product coming on. We're not seeing the same sales activity. Everyone's kind of in a wait and see mode, for lack of a better word.
And a little warning for headlines that are going to come for the next 3 months, the first quarter, especially in February and March, you're going to see some really interesting headlines because that's when the market peaks. We're going to see, market's down 40%, market's down. You always have to read past the headlines. The headlines is just the hook to get you to click on the article or buy the newspaper or engage in it.
And relative to always look at it through the historical lens of a 5-year average, a
Yeah.
10-year average, even a 3-year
Yeah.
average if you want to go shorter, because it's so volatile month to month, year to year. We've
Yeah.
been fortunate where we've had really linear growth for the
Yeah.
better part of a decade, maybe minus a blip when they introduced the stress test
Yeah.
for the first time. But really, since about 2010 onwards, it's been pretty linear trajectory. And now it's a bit of a different environment. But what I'm really curious to see in these numbers, and if you were to say, how's the market, I would say it's cautiously stabilized. Buyers are looking,
Yeah.
they're willing to engage if it's the right price, the right house, the right conditions. Sellers are also looking at what's around.
Yeah.
If it feels like a good time to list, they're moving forward with it.
Average price has been pretty flat since the summer.
Yeah, it's
So-
hovered right around just under the 1.1 million mark. I
Yeah.
believe it's 1,089,000. It's hovered basically once again for 6 months. And as long or so long as we don't really have a glut in inventory that comes on, that's unable to move, that will probably keep prices relatively stable. Obviously, there's future Bank of Canada announcements that everyone now is on pins and needles waiting for, which never used to be the case. Really, we'll kind of see what continues to happen with employment, with inflation, with key lending rates. But from a real estate side, we'll really be looking, or at least I'll be looking at, what's the absorption rate? How
Yeah.
much inventory do we have? What is happening with sales? Because we have so few sales, there's probably going to be bigger swings in price. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised with that.
Yeah. And new government regulations like the home vacancy tax
Yes,
being implemented, although I don't know how much of an impact that's going to have on the market.
I would agree. I don't know how much that is going to really impact things, especially since it's a tax and some people with the means will view it as a
Yeah.
cost of doing business. And then, of course, the foreign buyers ban that has been recently introduced. You want to lead the conversation on what you think that's going to do to our market?
Yeah, I'll start with the home vacancy tax. I actually just did a video on it because I found myself, I got the yellow sheet
Yep.
during the holidays. I will deal with that later. And oh yeah, I should deal with it because I think it's February 2nd. You have
Yeah.
to do it. It's a pretty streamlined system. You just go online, you click, you fill in the information they give you. There's 2 numbers to authenticate your property, which are also available on your tax bill if you've lost the yellow sheet. And you just declare whether you're living in the home, it's being rented, basically if one of the exemptions apply. The tax, if the property has been vacant and does apply, it's only 1% of the assessed value, not market value, but assessed value. I really don't think that it's going to have much of an impact on it. For somebody who would be looking to call it land banking, basically buy a property and hold on to it and not rent it out, but just hold on to it. If you have the means to do that, an extra 1% of the assessed value, I don't know if that's going to have an impact of deterring them. But that's what the goal is, to create more housing as we have a supply issue here in Toronto.
Yeah. And I think a reason for it too, to your point, is like why people would do that, because the instant answer becomes, why wouldn't you just rent out the property, make some income off it? The problem, I won't really comment or dive down the rabbit hole of like, our is the landlord tenant board, are our tenancy laws too strong or too weak in favor of landlords or tenants? The bigger problem, I would say, is the system is just inefficient, not working right now. There's huge delays of the landlord tenant board. You're looking 8 months to a year to get disputes resolved. So to your point, if someone is land banking or looking at making a future transaction with a property, having a tenant in there where there's potential for a dispute, which isn't necessarily the biggest problem, it's that this dispute won't get resolved. If you're trying to then sell a property or do something with it, and you're looking at, okay, if there's any type of disagreement, I could be looking at a year. It just doesn't make sense to them. So as you say, it becomes, okay, it's the cost of doing business to, say, land bank, which is unfortunate, right? So as much as we have these new regulations, the vacant home tax, to me, anytime I look at creating housing supply and helping, the landlord tenant board has been so underserviced and so underfunded. And that to me is one of the bigger problems in our housing crisis, is a lot of potential landlords, people who might be landlords, just aren't willing to enter that arena.
It really creates an unfair environment for both the landlord and the tenant, because if there's a legitimate issue on either side, it just takes forever to create animosity. And
absolutely. And right. And the headlines, once again, that's another sphere of the media world that gets very glamorized, right? There can be disputes where a landlord isn't doing proper repairs to a property, and a tenant shouldn't have to go through a winter without proper heating in a home, right? A landlord shouldn't have to suffer a tenant withholding rent for 8, 9, 10 months, a year of lost income. So the problem is, it's just an inefficient system. And then when you have an inefficient system, it incentivizes people to not enter it. There's just, some people look at it as, I don't want the risks of being involved in a long drawn out dispute in front of the landlord tenant board.
regardless of the system that is in place, efficient ones are always more effective. but there's going to be people that try to game the system, right? We just saw the second home reported on that was sold without the owner's knowledge. And I've heard of another one that hasn't been reported as well in Etobicoke. And it's one of those issues that I remember when I first got into the business, one of the mortgage specialists with RBC I was working with said, hey, here's something that we advise our elderly clients or people that own a property free and clear is there's a benefit to having a mortgage on it. And we're not just pushing a product here, but having a mortgage on the property has some benefit to you. And if you don't want to do that, if you just want to get a line of credit and never touch the line of credit, do that, and do that with one of the major financial institutions. What that does is create a second or third checkpoint where now they have to be satisfied for the release of the property because you're releasing that. And I think that's a great advice. And I remember that from almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, of keeping something on the home, and how do you avoid those situations? And then likewise, you talked about the professional scammers and problems that we
Yeah.
see. You get situations that we're seeing now too, unfortunately, where people are, hey, I'll rent this property, and then they immediately put it on Airbnb, and you have basically a short-term hotel coming out of what you thought was going to be going to a family, right?
Yeah. The Airbnb arbitrage. Listen, if that's going to be your business model, that's going to be your business model, but communicate that.
Yeah.
Have an understanding, and maybe you have to pay a premium to do that, but there are landlords that are on board for that. So it's just make sure that everything is communicated effectively, but there's always somebody who's going to try and cut a corner.
But yeah, and sorry, and to bring it back to the home vacancy tax, which is what you started actually talking about until I went on tangents, it is one of those things where we highly recommend, if you're unsure, speak to your accountant, speak to a lawyer, make sure you speak to people who can inform you of the various risks.
There's someone who can advise you on how best to proceed and what the pros and cons are of every situation, and give you a bigger picture on what there is out there. Having gone to business school, I got instilled with a few things. Number one is I do a SWOT analysis on everything. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, threats. Opportunity and threats are external, and then strengths and weaknesses are internal. What's the pros and cons of if I do it, if I don't do it, if I do it, how can I benefit from it? What might be an impact that changes it? And I find communicating with professionals, whether it's an accountant, a tax specialist, someone to help me relocate, or my mechanic, getting the information so that I can make an informed decision and then apply my little SWOT analysis to it.
Absolutely. And also an important thing too to note is that the home vacant tax applies retroactively to 2022.
It does. So yeah, it's actually the previous year.
It's the previous year. I think a lot of people are getting confused in terms of they get this and it's okay, I'm making a declaration. Is my home vacant or is it my primary residence? They're actually referring to 2022, the year that was, not the year to be. So it's an important thing
you don't have to forecast it.
Yeah, exactly. But an important point that wasn't inherently clear when you get it.
Yeah, that's the one thing I find from government communications is that it's not always exactly clear. Even our next topic, the foreign buyers ban, it's a little, I feel like I have to decode the question on the test. I'm like, well, sorry, what are you asking?
Yeah. And it's one of those things. And even for us as professionals working in this industry, working in this space, the problem that, we face is a lot of time we won't get the actual wording of the legislation until it's about to receive royal assent.
Yeah.
So we've essentially been waiting until the end of December to get how this is actually going to look in terms of nuts and bolts, the actual law of the land in it. And in reading it, as I said, we could spend a ton of time talking about it, but I think unfortunately it's too little too late, a little too light for what the government is trying to achieve. Whether or not you believe in the merits of it, you can debate that side of it, but in terms of what they're trying to achieve, it has so many numerous loopholes for students, people who are permanent residents, people who have been on work visas and they've been working and paying taxes for the past 3 years. So there's numerous ways that, unfortunately, I feel this will be circumvented.
Yeah.
And it's not really digging into what I feel is a major problem in our market anyway, is foreign ownership in general, and I think really what this tries to target is someone who's sitting somewhere else in the world right now, says, I just want to buy and have some real estate to hold forever and I'll let it sit vacant. That's kind of what they're targeting, but it's not a significant portion of at least the downtown core Toronto market.
There seems like there's so many exemptions that
Yeah.
if somebody really wanted to do it, they could go out and get it done if they were motivated to do it. I don't know how much of an impact it's going to have. I remember the timing of it released was interesting because I think Ontario was raising their foreign buyers from 20 to 25%. And then I can't remember if before or afterwards, pretty close. I think it was like within a week, they announced the foreign buyers ban. Looking back on it and now having to seen it and understand a bit more is that 25% apply to those that are exempt?
Yeah, great question.
Again, ask a tax specialist because I know enough that I don't know enough.
Yeah, it's like an onion. We're peeling layers here. My personal feeling is had they wanted to introduce legislation like this, had they wanted to go in this direction, the time was years ago. And really, I think the problem has been just in general is there's just been a lack of cohesive national policy because prior to this 2-year ban coming in, there were there's a foreign buyers tax here, and now this municipality is going to add it, and now this one's going to add it. Oh, it doesn't apply to the province; it's just this area. And so it was odd, and we had this rapidly rising market, and we had this real discrepancy and inconsistency among provinces and even within municipalities in the same province,
how to navigate
what the rules of the game are, right? And what the objective was. So I've always felt that, if you're going to regulate and you're going to legislate, at least make it clear, concise, and consistent, which is the bigger problem because now it's
saying communication's important.
I know communication. Who would have thought? But it's as someone operating in the marketplace, as we both are, and to even clients, right? They go, "What do I need to know about?" Because I'd love to hear your conversations, but when I speak with a lot of homeowners, they're just like, "How does this impact me? Because it's not clear.
Yeah.
Will this affect my sale? Will this change? Because I can't even read what's written."
With our brokerage, we do take extensive efforts to market globally. And there's a huge number of expats that live abroad. And so there still is a target market and there still is a reason to do that. But the reality of when you look down at the numbers and break it down, how many foreign buyers did we have from previous years? It's a very, very minute number.
Yeah. And I don't think it's going to have the impact that they're hoping in terms of there's going to be this all of a sudden this glut of inventory. These extra homes aren't going to be purchased by foreign buyers for local buyers. Especially now with the rising interest rates, you've created the double-edged sword of, okay, the market slowed down and people who felt like maybe they couldn't get in have a chance to get in, but interest rates have risen so rapidly. My purchasing power has deteriorated to the point where I can't carry the home that I can now purchase effectively. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, for listening. We really appreciate all of your support. And since we're talking about our time in Germany, as they say in Germany, alles hat ein Ending, nur die Wurst has zwei, which is a lovely German way of saying everything has an ending, but the sausage has two. It's actually a song. It's got a dance. It's got a whole thing over there. If you can say that anywhere in Germany, I promise you, people will smile. They'll know exactly what you're talking about.
I never ran into that one, but we'll just sign off with tschüss.
Tschüss, auf Wiedersehen. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. Oh, we got to tell them to like and subscribe.
Okay, do you want to do that?
Yeah, sure. I'll push the.
Okay, you'll do the pushing.
I'll don't worry, Ken. I'll be the bad man.
You be the pusher.
I'll be the sales guy.
You be the pusher.
I'll hard close on the.
Pusher.
Okay, everyone, listen. It's at this opportunity, I'd like to hard close you to push the like button, subscribe, and forward to a friend. Thank you.
Yes, danke für alles. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Cheers.